Z-Wave is one of the leading smart home standards here, and I am really excited to be here with Mitch Klein, who's the Executive Director of the Z-Wave Alliance. So thank you, Mitch, for being here. This is great.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be joining you, Brian.
Great. I think just to kind of start things off, can you summarize a little bit what Z-Wave is, what it does for the average homeowner?
Sure thing. And I understand this is a pretty confusing topic, not just because of Z-Wave, but protocols in general. Z-Wave essentially is the platform for the smart home, at least that's how we position it, whereby it is a series of technology. We call it a module, which has a chip and a radio and some storage to be able to enable devices to communicate to each other. This board, if you will, this module, if you will, gets installed or is included in door locks, security panels, dimmer switches, light devices, sensors, thermostats, so on and so forth. So basically, it enables the smart home device to communicate to each other. So it's enabling technology, much kind of like you see Intel going Intel inside. Intel provides the technology to enable computers to compute. Z-Wave enables devices to be able to communicate with each other.
No, that's great. So what do you think or are the biggest benefits to Z-Wave for the average kind of homeowner or consumer?
Okay, first of all, I think it's important to know that the Z-Wave platform was developed specifically for the smart home, which no other platform can actually make that claim. Now, why is that important? Well, because there are a couple of things that are mandates that Z-Wave requires and has required from day one. Number one is a requirement for interoperability. That means that you can't go and develop your own device and just kind of run with it wherever you want to go. It must become compatible, interoperable, whatever term you want to use, so it will work with all the other Z-Wave devices. Okay, that's number one. And I can get into that a little bit more if you want. Number two is backwards compatibility, which is something that engineers are not always fond of because it makes things a lot more difficult. But what that does mean is if you jumped on the Z-Wave bandwagon way back when the first devices came in and you've got a 10-year-old, 12-year-old dimmer you put in the wall, and you bring in some new devices, they will continue to operate and function the way they did when you first put them in. So again, as nice as it is to run out and replace your smartphone every 6 months or 18 months, you don't want to run out and replace a thermostat or a security panel every 6, 12, 18 months. The third piece of it is the security, which is one of the reasons, if not the primary reason, why every single security service provider that is tied into any type of smart home device has actually utilized Z-Wave, because Z-Wave is the most secure platform out there, and no one would really debate that. That's pretty much the way it is.
Wow. Can you expand on what you said there when you said the security makers? Who are you talking about there using Z-Wave?
Basically, all the security panel companies. So whether you're talking about 2GIG or Honeywell or Qualsys, I always get in trouble when I start mentioning brands because there are so many of them I don't get some, but pretty much any security panel that was designed or put into the marketplace for adding in door locks and other types of devices has Z-Wave in it because it is so secure. Wow. There's not been any example of a Z-Wave device being hacked. And the asterisk there is, well, it's been done in a lab under unrealistic conditions. But in terms of when you hear or read about it in the press about a drone attack on a particular apartment building and they have lights or, all these other things that you read about, you will never actually read one that actually hacked Z-Wave. It's always been something that was set up. And sure, to say that nothing is hackable, of course, induces those to prove you wrong. But in terms of, real world examples, it's never happened.
How does Z-Wave help the average consumer save time, save money? That's kind of our big creed here on Automate Your Life. We want to save time, we want to save money, make this easy on people.
Okay, so that's a great question. And as we already know, the whole concept of putting in a smart home, there's nothing easy about it. The industry has not made it easy, and neither have the silicon providers. But Z-Wave in particular makes it easy for a couple of reasons. And it's number one, is this interoperability, and the mandate means that you have choice. So by having choice, it means you can pick particular brands you like, particular functions you like, and also have a wide range of pricing available. So, from a dimmer switch, you could pick up a $200 dimmer switch or a $39 one, and all points in between, and every one of them can have Z-Wave. So it definitely saves you that, could save you money. In terms of saving time, it minimizes the amount of homework you have to do. Just look for the Z-Wave logo on the box or on the device. And the question of will it work is no longer applicable, as long as it actually has that logo on it. When you look at the other platforms, the will it work is definitely a question you have to research. The other thing is when you look at some of the other platforms out there, and not including Zigbee, because Zigbee actually doesn't have this issue, but when you look at Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or Thread or any of these other platforms, they do not specify an application layer. What does that mean? It means that they can send and receive signals back and forth, but the actual content of what's been communicated is up to the manufacturer to develop. So as an example, let's use Wi-Fi. Again, well, Wi-Fi is obviously a critical technology to use for high bandwidth requirements and so on and so forth. But when you have a Wi-Fi device, say you have a Wi-Fi thermostat, you have an application that you launch on your smartphone for that Wi-Fi device, for that thermostat. If you then have a Wi-Fi fan, if you will, you now have another application on your phone. So now you got two applications, one for your fan, one for your thermostat, and so on and so forth. And this continues on. You end up literally having a screen full of virtual remote controls on your phone.
No, that's a great point. And I like when you say it has that logo on there. That's it. You know it's going to work, and you know it's going to set up correctly.
Yeah, you can kind of see that logo there. There's a whole bunch of them flying around behind me, I guess, and that'll be the logo.
Yeah. So what are the recent upgrades that you'd like my fans, my subscribers to know about Z-Wave? What's the most recent stuff that you want to tell them about?
Great question. I've already mentioned the S2 security, which is pretty significant. And the S2 not only does it lock down access outside of those who are supposed to be utilizing your gear, but it also speeds up communication. And again, that's a lengthy technical explanation and how. But another thing that just got layered on top of that is really a compelling thing. We call it Smart Start. And what Smart Start does is it enables you or a service provider or anyone to actually include a device into the system simply by scanning a QR code with your phone, with your smartphone, automatically gets included. If you think about what it takes to actually add devices, or we use the term include devices, into a system, you usually have to go to your hub, get into the include mode, then go to the individual device, and depending on the specific instructions, maybe find the hidden button and tap that 3 times, rub your head, pat your belly, and type include it. And each brand does the inclusion in the way that they feel is best for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. That makes sense. But what Smart Start does is enables you to scan a QR code on the box itself, even before you've installed the device. You scan these QR codes, it automatically gets included into the system once the devices have been powered up. Ring is actually one of the first companies to really do it from a system-wide perspective.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the things that gets people about smart home technology, right? If they can't get it set up, it's a pain, and then they return it, and then it's bad press in general for smart home. This industry is too hard. That's what we hear, and we got to get to that layer where it is that simple. And I think HomeKit has tried to do similar things to varying degrees of success, and I'm hearing Thread kind of do the same thing as well with scan a code, bring it in. And I think this is a great method to bring devices in. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it is. And again, we at Silicon Labs working on it from multiple protocol perspective, but you can bear in mind that with respect to Thread and others, there's no defined application layer yet. So stay tuned. This is all going to come together at some point in time, but with Z-Wave, we're a bit ahead of the curve.
So, on that note, you talked about Ring a little bit. There's a massive growth right now with Google Home, the Echo series of products. We're seeing Siri grow. How is Z-Wave preparing for this future with voice assistants?
Actually, I would say we have been prepared all along. Voice assistants have generally not been defined as hubs. They've always been sort of a user interface into hubs. We're seeing a bit of a change there when when Amazon put Zigbee into one of their devices. Google's been talking about putting it in or doing OpenThread or something, but nothing's been defined there. So you're still at the point where you need, and it's unfortunate, but the reality is you need a hub or a gateway, whatever term you want to use. So something like, just as an example, SmartThings. Once you put that hub in, now all of a sudden that voice assistant, whatever brand it is controlling everything that's within that hub, which of course includes all the Z-Wave devices. We've already been there. We do have a couple of our members that are building things like the Siri, the Amazon things into their devices. So you're starting to see that come out. One company is called Hogar that they're doing it. But again, we are already working with and compatible with all of the voice assistants that are out there.
Let's continue down the path of talking about your competitors. I think you've talked about this a little bit. Where do you feel you have the biggest advantage, versus Zigbee and Thread and Wi-Fi? And I think again, you've spoken to this a little bit, but if there's other advantages you see Z-Wave having.
Well, yeah, we haven't really gotten too deeply into it. And again, my role, I never see it as really dismissing the other platforms, because every platform has a valid use case, and so we all ultimately will and have to coexist. But what makes Z-Wave sort of the competitive leader in the smart home itself? I'll give you 2 points. One is ecosystem, and the other is from a technology perspective. Because we've had such a head start, again, with over 2,800 products and over 90% of the monitored security panels with having the Z-Wave in it, you've already got a very large ecosystem, and these are all with brands that all of your listeners are certainly familiar with.
Yeah.
For example, door locks. Every single branded door lock has at least a Z-Wave version, if not is exclusive on Z-Wave. So that's one thing. The other thing is, from a technical perspective, Z-Wave is what we call sub-gigahertz, meaning that it operates, it's around 900 megahertz, versus where Wi-Fi, Thread, Zigbee, they're all at 2.4 gig. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I'll give you two reasons why that's sub-gig is preferred. Number one is you're talking about in a smart home where more than likely you have walls. And when you talk about the actual physics behind the different frequencies, sub-gig is a long enough frequency. It transmits through building materials very, very effectively. Give you a good example. Some of your viewers may remember the days of cordless telephones.
Yeah.
Some of you may even have a cordless telephone. And those both seem to work fine, no matter where you were walking around the house, because that was in the sub-gig frequency range. Flip side of it, think about how happy your viewers are with the ability to grab Wi-Fi throughout the home. Well, it's at 2.4. You've got dead spots in your home, areas where it just doesn't work, which is why, you started to hear about these so-called mesh, Wi-Fi networks to try and extend where Wi-Fi can reach. 2.4 as a frequency doesn't really do all that great through building materials. It's relatively limited. So from an ability to actually have devices work and communicate effectively, sub-gig is very important. To amplify that point, the Zigbee platform have recently added sub-gig to their capabilities as well. And even Wi-Fi has been talking about it, whether or not I don't yet know.
Talking about these advantages, And you've talked about the application the application layer a little bit, and we've seen Zigbee and Thread start to work on ... And this is something I've been paying very close attention to because it is talking about kind of starting to merge things a little bit, starting to make things clearer, get us out of that application hell that I talked about a little bit. How are you either combating that or working within this as the ZWave Alliance?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the term combating because from my perspective, any success in the smart home is good for everybody.
Yeah.
I like what Zigbee's done with putting ... over Thread to try and define an application layer. Unfortunately, it's going to be an optional application layer, so we'll see how any quote branding makes things easier for for consumers to be able to figure out what's what. I know Thread has been playing around with other, possibly going open Thread or Weave or whatever terms you want to use for it. So we'll see where that goes. So we don't combat it in that way. We kind of embrace it and look at it in terms of how do we provide some type of the unification platform, which is something that we are, of course working on. So you've got, for lack of better terms, we'll look at just two layers in the typical software stack. One, which is the communication layer, the transport layer, how the things get from point A to point B. And then the piece above that, which is the application layer that says, okay, now that I got it, can I understand it? Can I know what to do with that once I get it? So transport layer, we know we have had members do proof of concept with the Z-Wave over Thread or Z-Wave over 15.4. So again, stay tuned. There's a lot of this discussion, a lot of this research going on, many things which I really can't discuss or get into at this point, but I can say that those very important discussions and conversations are being had right now, and it is an eye towards, and I like to say what our mission is really, it just works. We've got a way to go, but I promise you, we are definitely paying attention and focused on the it just works aspect, which should work with some of the other platforms as well.
Yeah, and I think that is ultimately what is the most important for the industry right now. Because, does branding help when it says ... when there's a little ... on there? Probably not. In the end, it just has to work no matter what product is coming out, and it has to work together.
Yeah, I wish I had one of the examples by me, but you pick up some of these devices and there's like 9 different logos on it.
Yeah.
And I understand it. I mean, it's good to have it. So as a consumer, you can look for the logo, but, really it's like, my guess is your viewers are probably a little bit more initiated and will look for the logo. But in many cases, consumers don't.
Right.
We have to address that.
Right. Okay, so I was telling you earlier, I do have a couple questions from my Patreon subscribers or my patrons here. So this one's from Bruce McDonald. He says, I know Z-Wave is a mesh network. Any plans to be able to see that map graphically displayed or allow users to do physical remapping and see signal strength?
Okay, Bruce, that's a great question. And let me take kind of two points to that. Number one is in terms of actually seeing the map, we as an alliance developed a tool we call the Certified Installer Toolkit, which gives you very easy access and graphic representation of the mesh, that you can actually see how the mesh is working and what hops are being taken where and what's connected to what. That capability to see that map is available to developers to put into their products. I am aware of one so far that has done so. If you are familiar with the Qualsys security panel, I think it's QOLSYS, Quality of Life Systems. Qualsys has actually made that available to their customers. So you can actually go into a particular window because they have a nice touch screen and you can actually see the map. So it's available through the Z-Wave Alliance if you want to buy the toolkit. Well, right now, again, I know Qualsys does it. I suspect others are in the process of doing so. It's a good question, and I could definitely see value in that, so you can really feel comfortable in terms of having your devices communicate properly. In terms of manually rerouting it, at this point, no, because the whole purpose of Z-Wave is to be able to self-heal so that the system sets itself up and how the devices will communicate. And if for some reason a device goes offline, then the system completely reroutes itself automatically within milliseconds so that you don't actually have to get involved. And by overriding that and making it a manual process, our fear is devices could become suspect or exposed to potential failures. So that's not really something that we enable at this time.
So another one of my patrons here, John Tomlinson Jr., is there a plan in place to support more home devices for the residential markets?
Also a great question, John. We clearly, the sales team for Silicon Labs is out there, presenting the opportunities to all types of device makers. I know when it comes to home health products, things like that, there are discussions around it. I'd be very curious to know if you have any particular device types in mind that are not being addressed. I mean, when I actually think about the smart home itself, other than the voice assistant speakers, which I know we'd love to get our product directly into them, and we're certainly working with them to make that happen, and it hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure which device types are not included.
Sure.
But to address that, to make things easier, there are a lot of manufacturers of appliances and hardware thingies, if you will. And in order for a device manufacturer to get on the network, they also need some software expertise to do that. And we are actually actively working and hope to release soon a method for, let's just say, automatic inclusion where they don't have to be software developers. It's almost premature to say it, but we're definitely addressing it. So any company with a hardware thingy would be able to hop onto the Z-Wave network very simply just by adding the chip. The software becomes pretty much already pre-done and pre-made for them. Working on it.
An add-on module essentially for
much.
Not smart devices. And yeah, I mean, that's a major benefit to people. Yeah, I mean, I think this has been really beneficial. I think you said a lot of things that are going to help a lot of my subscribers, and I really appreciate you taking the time here to sit down with me. I mean, I imagine you're a pretty busy guy, so thank you once again here, Mitch, for sitting down with us.
Hey, it's really a pleasure. Actually, I love to hear back from you and your listeners or viewers, because that's very important to me. Yeah, busy, but this is the important stuff: is being able to communicate and talk with those that actually use the devices. So keep me posted. Love to hear from you.
Now, after closing off this discussion with Mitch and the Z-Wave Alliance, what I really came to understand is the future, what they are looking to in the future, and how Silicon Labs is much more embedded with some of the other protocols than I even understood. I had seen little pieces of that, but really never understood the full depth of that. I also understand some of the things going forward that will be really impactful to us as smart home owners. They are working on bringing the whole industry together, and they are a big force in that, obviously. The products continue to develop, and that backwards compatibility is a really big deal, I think, for all of us. You don't want to have to replace everything all the time. The other piece that I thought was so important is that smart home module or Z-Wave module, to attach that essentially to a not so smart device in your home and give manufacturers a way to become smart. The last thing is my comparison video for Zigbee and Z-Wave. I think that video really holds true. I didn't hear anything today that really takes that comparison and throws it out. What I did hear was a little bit more about the future, and I think that is a really important component. So I hope you've got that out of this. If you need more of that detailed comparison, the video's on screen now. So until next time, guys, don't hate, automate. Go save yourself some time and some money, and we'll see you next time.